Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our breakout room. I'm Kathleen Parwick, M&L's Community Collaboration and Development Officer. This morning, we're going to hear from Jason Garland, our new Asset Management Officer, and the presentation is about the Asset Management Readiness Scale, a self-assessment and guidance document and tool issued by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It captures where you are in asset management as a municipality and provides guidance on what the next steps are. This presentation will take a look at the document and provide advice on how to assess and achieve each step in the process. Passing things over to Jason now. When he's done, we'll be back for Q&A. Take it away, Jason.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. So I will share the presentation with the participants now, and we'll get underway. Begin it. There we go. So this presentation and this program is offered with assistance from the Municipal Asset Management Program, which is delivered by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and funded by the Government of Canada. It's part of the BAM-NL program and is done in partnership with them, as well as working with other communities that you've heard Kathleen speak on yesterday in one of the presentations that she put off. So my presentation is dealing with where are you with asset management and the asset management readiness scale and you. So we're going to look at the importance of a proactive asset management program and how you get started with that. The asset management readiness scale is really where we're going to do the deep dive and spend the majority of our time this morning. And it's going to look at how to use it as a tool, as a guidance document, and as a self-assessment document. And it's going to dive into the 5 competencies that they have laid out in their tool and the outcomes that you can sort of look to expect from going through this process. So the competencies are broken out as a policy and governance, people and leadership, data and information, planning and decision making, and the contribution to the asset management practice as a whole. I'm also going to briefly touch on the Municipality of Newfoundland and Labrador's online asset management readiness scale tool, where you can go on through your dashboard at Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador's website and enter in your scale there if you are so inclined. Then we're going to follow up with any questions that you may have or any discussions that you want to partake in and see where it goes. So the importance of proactive asset management. The importance of it, we're all doing asset management. We are all engaged in asset management. It's just the majority of our asset management practices are reactive. And as such, it's putting a strain on budgets, and it's not looking to the future. It's just putting out fires as they pop up. So with all the relief with the COVID stimulus package and all that, all the re-energizing funds that the government programs are putting out now, that money is coming from somewhere, and it's going to have to be paid back somewhere at some time. So there's going to be always ever increasing demands on an already tight budget that municipalities are experiencing annually. So it's trying to prepare for those tighter budgets and maximizing and stretching that $1 to make it 2. It's moving away from the reactive asset management practices, as time is money. So if you're decreasing the amount of planning and implementation and execution time that you have on these capital projects, the cost to do that is going to increase. Whereas if you're able to look at synergies, sort of partnership approaches to these projects, you can find ways to stretch that dollar and minimize the impact of it. You're never going to get fully away from reactive, but hopefully you get closer to 80% proactive, 90% proactive, and 10% reactive. That's kind of where you want to envision yourself getting, because you're never, like I said, you're never going to be able to remove the reactive, the emergencies, the failures entirely. It's also proactive helps you flatten the curve, which is a popular phrase these days, and in a negative sort of way, but this is looking at your peaks and valleys of your capital renewal. So you're looking, if you're not looking far out, you may come to a point where there's a bunch of capital need in the next year. Whereas if you have that forecasting and that foresight, you can see that, okay, in 5-10 years time, there's going to be a huge peak of anticipated capital need because you're going to have a bunch of infrastructure that's reaching its end of useful life. So you can plan for that. You can say, okay, well, instead of trying to get it all done, which we're never going to have the budget to do in 1 year, maybe we can chalk it out to spread it over 4 years. So rather than a 10 million chunk in year 5, for example, you can do 3 in year 4, 3 in year 5, 4 in year 6 sort of deal. Just sort of like flatten that curve. Rather than the spike, you just got a nice level, more level bump. Finding synergies in capital projects. I've had it told to me a couple times during my career that stories where people have gone and they've replaced the asphalt in 10 kilometers of road, and then the next year the water pipes under the road break, and they discover that they need to replace the whole 10 kilometers of road because they need to dig it all up to replace the pipe. Knowing the expected useful lives, the conditions, the assessment data on these things allows you to plan and not run into a situation where that's going to happen more often than not. So you can sort of say, okay, we can't do 10 kilometers of road this year, but similar to flattening the curve, we'll do it in chunks of 3 kilometers and we'll replace the pipes at the same time. That way it's all brand new, nothing should go wrong. You're also, with proactive asset management, looking towards, you're going to be ready for funding and grant programs. There's going to be shovel-ready projects. You're going to have a list, a prioritized list with asset management that you'll know, and you can prioritize and gather and ready as soon as the funding program is announced. You're well on your way to applying for that program. On that note, FCM has been announced their direct funding program is coming out for their final round in January. So a key part of that is this asset management scale. And the key part of the application, you need to include that in it. So now is a good time to, if you haven't done it, look into doing it, go along with, answer some questions, make some notes as you're going through, and that way you can help fill it out when you get back to your municipality with your stakeholders there at the same time. And then you got it done and you're ready for when they launch that program in January, because there's high demand on those programs and that direct funding sources. Another great benefit of it is that it does provide you with a stronger voice when you're lobbying for government. It's a data-driven, proactive future. You've got evidence that you can base around it when you're lobbying for additional funding, because I've yet to encounter anybody who can tell me that they have enough budget to do all their capital need every year. It's about making things less worse and just you're prioritizing your risk management. So this is where proactive is hugely beneficial to getting you out ahead of the curve and getting you ready for these funding programs, these cost mitigation factors, and planning for that type budgets. So how do you get started with asset management? Getting started with asset management is recognizing, first off, that you need a defined asset management program. You need to define the way and the process that you're doing asset management, even if you're just defining how you're currently doing it, and even if that's just purely reactive or year by year. So you need to have a defined thing, and then you can start looking at where you want to be. So then you got to get key stakeholders involved in the process of developing this plan. And that key stakeholders are a lot of different rounds. It's not just councillors, it's not just upper management, it's the boots on the ground, the ones dealing with your infrastructure, dealing with your assets every day, the people using your assets every day, so the members of the communities. That are also important to get some input on the process. Identifying where you are currently. This is a great tool that we're going to talk about that can give you the self-assessment to get a feel for where you need to be or where you are, and then where you need to be or want to be, because it's more about want than need as much as anything. So establishing where you want to be, this tool also gives you a kind of horizon as to where you want to get to and where you could end up. And then looking at where you are, where you want to be, you can certainly develop a plan and a roadmap of how to get there. So the asset management readiness scale, this is the meat and potatoes of this presentation, and it's a really good tool to establish where you are and to lay out where you want to be, like I had mentioned. So the asset management readiness scale is a tool that helps you evaluate your current competencies. So it looks at the broad spectrum of categories amongst that input into asset management, and it kind of helps ask questions that guide you as to where you're to. And it supports you during that process. It shines light on places where you might not be thinking of. It might give you a different perspective on a process, and that sort of thing. And it breaks it down, like I said, into 5 key categories, which are divided into 3 separate outcomes. And each of those outcomes are broken into 5 different levels. So the 5 key categories are policy and governance, people and leadership, data information, planning and decision making, and the contribution asset management. That's your 5 competencies. So we're going to look at them in that order, and we're going to have a discussion on them as we move forward. I'll just give some insights, experiences that I have, and try to get you thinking about ways to accomplish each level or each objective that works best for you. So key outcomes of policy and governance. Developing and enacting your policy and your objectives is obviously key, but putting in place a strategy to get there and a roadmap to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And how do you know where you want to be? Well, you need a way to measure and monitor that progress and make sure that your asset management program is operating the way you intended it. And there's going to be tweaks being made along the road. It would be unusual for there to be a flawless implementation and you get exactly where you want to be right away. It's a growing process. It's an evolving process, because when you do get to where you want to be and you are operating on all of these objectives that you set out, things are going to change within your municipality. And then you're going to need to evolve to that changing demographics or changing need of the community. You're going to need to change how you manage your assets and your level of service. This is going to involve senior management and council in order to enact it and input it, because it's a policy, it needs to be adopted. So policy objectives is the first outcome that it looks at, and it looks how interested, it gauges the level of interest of the council and senior management in developing this policy. It looks at, is there a commitment from council? Is the very first level. Are you committed to asset management? The fact that you're taking in this presentation is a great key indicator that you are. So so there's the first step, and you have to show that interest, because it's no good for the boots on the ground to have to be interested in asset management. I mean, it is great, but it's not going to get a policy passed unless they're going to be able to communicate the need to you as policy implementers, and that's where they need support. Drafting an asset management policy is the outcome from this, and you're going to want to get a whole raft of input on that. There's a lot of resources available to you to see what you want to your policy to and your objective of your asset management plan, because it's going to be different for each and every one of you slightly. There will be similarities, no doubt, but there's going to be differences for each community. Each person is going to want to get a different objective slightly out of it. So get resources, talk to your peers. We have resources. I can pass you along to other municipalities that are very keen on helping grow asset management in Newfoundland and Labrador. So they're eager to share their experiences and their policies and that with you and help that discussion. But that's the one takeaway that I can stress to you in this thing is to get information from different points of view and evaluate all of it based on the objective you want for your municipality and develop your policy around that. And once you do that, you use it to guide how you're conducting your process. You use it to manage the assets you have, but then you look at it when it's implemented and running, and you continue to look at it and tweak it and refine it as needed, because like I said, this is an evolving document. It's never going to be one and done. It's going to be constantly updated and revised, because everything's going to gradually change anyway. As new tools become available, as new methods of doing things become available, you're going to want to definitely look into tweaking and updating on a regular basis. The strategy and roadmap outcome is going to, it looks at how you decide when you got that policy and the direction you want to take for your asset management program within your municipality. So you have to identify your benefits and objectives. Like, do you want to just maintain a database of your infrastructure? Do you want to capture your infrastructure and your facilities? Or do you want to do everything? And then how do you get there? So you want to identify what you really want to capture, what you want your asset management program to do for your municipality, and then how do you want it to do that? And then how often, like what are your goals? And how do you stage this so that you're set up to succeed and not just setting yourself up for failure? Because if you go out and look at, I want to get all of our assets into a database in 1 year, all assessed, that may be doable, 100%, but it may also be a goal that's a little lofty that you might want to, and that you're just going to look at it and be like, I'm setting myself up for failure. So you want to kind of judge based on your needs, your priorities, and make sure you're not setting yourself up to fail. So maybe it's just, we're going to capture our infrastructure this year, and we're going to increase, get our facilities next year, and then our fleet the year after, and then we're going to have everything into the database by year 3, and then in year 5 we're going to make sure everything is up to date and assessed in year 5, so that everything's starting from a level keel at that point, but we can still use the data we get from years 1 to 3 as we go forward. So actively achieving it, and then you're following your roadmaps and you're continually improving. That's where you want to be, continually improving, continually updating and evolving as you continue to grow and expand your asset management program. And then how do you know if you're on the right track? Well, you need some way to measure and some way to monitor. You need to, and that's key. You need to be able to set things that you can say that you can do. You need to be able to identify key goals, and short-term goals is level 1, obviously, but that's very important. Like, you want to have the little victories. You want that momentum to build. So by saying yourself, you don't want to say, okay, like I said, here, we got nothing, we're going to have everything by the year 1. Like, yeah, that's a great goal. Maybe year 1's not the year for it, but it's a great goal to have, is everything. How do we get there? Let's set the intermediate goals, because if there's no little, yes, we've done it sort of thing from here to here, then it's going to get discouraging for some people. And some people are going to say, well, I don't see the point. And that's not where we want to be. So we want to identify those short-term actions that we can demonstrate progress, demonstrate benefit, because this is, and another competency of this that we'll get to is resourcing. This, you want to demonstrate progress and benefit because you need to be able to defend the resource commitment that it's going to require. So then you need to figure out the data for your practices that you want to collect and measure, and begin collecting that data, and then evaluate, establish your outcomes, establish other benchmarks, other goals that you're going to want to put in place, and monitor that. So are we updating our asset assessments once we complete a capital project on them? That's a realistic goal to have. Is our level of service for our infrastructures where we want it to be? And these are all measurable goals when you define what your level of service is. So defining excuse me, sorry. Defining your level of service, your measurable, obtainable goals, and having them spaced out during the whole process, so you keep that momentum going, is a very important factor, a very key factor of getting this, keeping this going, keeping it updated, keeping people energized and buying into it, and having that team mentality to your asset management program. Now, the people that are going to implement the asset management, the boots on the ground, the people involved, the people cheerleading it and championing it, this is what we're going to look at next. So the key outcomes for people in leadership, establishing a team, and not just any team, a cross-functional team, which means a team that is from all aspects of the asset management process. You don't just want the executive level, sort of council level people only involved in this, because what that perspective will give you is not necessarily the same outcomes that you desire or need, or you might not have a view even on something that someone who's dealing with this on a daily basis has. There's two different perspectives there, and it'll give two different point of views that will maybe come together and define a third way that you can do asset management that you wouldn't even think of ordinarily. Defining clear accountability for these roles of the team members within your municipality. Accountability is important. It's often seen as a negative word, but not in this case. You need accountability in order to make sure the messaging and the expectations are clear between the members and the roles of everyone involved in asset management. So that's why you need to develop a clear accountability, so everyone's on the same page, so they're not off doing things that you didn't think that the outcome. So when you get a report at the end of the year, it's not what you were expecting, then obviously there's a miscommunication somewhere. And the key thing about it, once you define the accountability for the people in the roles, the most important thing is being able to ensure that they have the resources and the commitment there to be able to execute that role. Because if you just say you're responsible for making sure that all our infrastructure inventory is in a database, but we're not going to assist in any way, shape, or form in assigning resources, you just have to find time in your day to get this done. You can't go after them at the end of the day when they don't have the resources to do this and say you didn't get it done. That's not how it's going to be a success. It's not going to lend itself to a positive experience, and you're not going to get the buy-in that you need as a municipality without committing adequate resources to it. Now, resources are tight, but it's just it's seeing the benefit of it, and that a little asset management can go a long way, and then you can keep building on that and building on that and building on that until you have a efficient system working for your municipality, that works for your municipality, that gets you out of that reactive asset management and into the proactive. So that's going to involve senior management and council to advance that, because it sometimes and most times requires increased budgets for some things. It may require going out and acquiring another personnel staff member, or oftentimes there's also consultants that are needed to be done for some of the more other data inventory that you may need to and will need to get into when you're doing assessments and stuff of certain facilities and infrastructure. Oftentimes, most municipalities don't have the in-house expertise to do stuff, so there is going to be resources needed to this, and time and staff and going to outside sources as well is all included in that. So cross-functional teams. That's the team that's going to champion, recommend the roles, recommend the policies, recommend procedures for going through and guiding the implementation of your asset management program. So identifying the representation needed is the first step. Who will we like on this team? Is it just a counselor and the town clerk, or is it a couple of counselors, a clerk, the maintenance person, and someone from the community, or some other representation of that? Once you have them in place, you need to listen to their guidance and take what they are presenting you. They should be doing their research, their work on what the municipality needs, how it needs to change, in which aspects it needs to change, because there's going to be strengths and weaknesses within your municipality when it comes to asset management. There's going to be places where you're able to do some stuff in-house and some stuff out of house. So this team will help work with what you have as a resource, what the municipality's population wants, their level of service, and sort of that. They're going to help build that structure for your asset management program. They're going to be guiding it. They're going to be updating it. They're going to be working with it on a daily to help generate capital plans, keep your inventories up to date, update them when they've been renewed, repaired, or sold or divested of. They're going to be updating and working with that the whole process. Now, for the first little bit, or depending on the size of your municipality, they may not be a dedicated person to doing the asset management work. It may be a part of a job description to update this at certain times, but again, that's where the resourcing and your unique municipality structure is going to dictate what form it takes. But eventually, working into having permanent members or permanent roles within a job position of updating and working on and guiding and supporting the asset management process within your organization. So that's the importance of your team. Is your guiding, is your working, it's your boots on the ground when it comes to asset management, and they will help steer, advise, and provide insight into tweaks that need to be made, changes that need to come up, and best practices. And there's all kinds of resources out here that we can help you with in implementing and looking at your data and where you're to, and how to get you along and get that team moving in the right direction for your municipality. And then they'll be able to give you, as counselors, if you're or any member of the municipality that aren't involved in the asset management, they'll be able to give you the explanations, the advice, and the instructions, experiences that you need to make decisions in your day-to-day functions. Accountability. So the accountability is, like I said, is often seen as a negative, but in this case, it's just mostly, it needs to have clear, defined goals and resources and responsibilities that both parties are aware of. So identifying a champion is the first thing. Who is going to lead this charge? Who's going to lead asset management within our municipality? And then what do they need? What members do they want for a team? All right, and what do we want them to produce to us? And are they aware of that? So that will get to like your roadmaps, your policy implementations and recommendations, your roles of job descriptions, where certain accountabilities are going to lie, whose accountability is going to be to update the data set at the end of capital renewal projects. So we've just replaced 10 kilometers of road. Who updates that in our database? What sort of responsibilities are there? We need to start working our annual budget. Who's going to pull out our capital needs for the next 3 years? How do we go about deciding who puts together the report? Those types of descriptions, accountabilities, and responsibilities. So updating it, communicating it, making sure it's being evolved and updated as technology and as roles and needs of the municipality change. So that's your accountability part. That's where the clear communication of expectation has to lie, and then that follows into naturally what resources do they need? What resources do they need to carry out their role? So obviously, if you are starting your asset management or even continuing it, in order to grow it, it needs additional resources. That can be in the form of extra time, extra staff, outside help, working groups, cohorts of like-minded, and similar situation municipalities coming together and just having a discussion on what works, what doesn't work. And we will facilitate any interest in that. We're happy to, and I will be developing further workshops to dive into how to go about each and every one of these main competencies as the year goes on. But yeah, this is where the council needs to look at what do we need to give our staff and our members to give the best benefit of this program to our population and our people in the community. So then you need to start with buy-in, and council needs to be on board, and buy-in is very important whenever you're enacting something new, you need champions, you need people to be on board, you need to have a positive outlook on it, because you're going to get, it's going to happen. You're going to say, people, we've been doing this 25 years this way. What's the point in changing? Because things have changed. Things have gotten better. Things have gotten more efficient. There's many different tools and things that weren't available 25 years ago that are available now. There's many new programs, many new concerns. 25 years ago, climate change wasn't nearly as big of a topic as it is now. So have you been doing it 25 years the same way? Then you have not really accounted for any sort of climate change action. For example, so there's reasons to that I'm constantly calling this an evolving document, an evolving process, because the world's evolving and your assets are in the world. It needs to change the way you do work with them. So it's got to be constantly tweaked. And that's how you look at it. You develop your policy, you develop your initial resource commitment. And as you grow the program, you need to look at, what do we need to bring in? Do we need to bring in more assessment, like outside assessment? Do we need to bring in staff? Do we need to, is the way we're maintaining our data still sufficient for the way that we want to use our data? Or is there another way that we could be using this data, or another way we could be structuring this data that will give us a different outcome that we want, that are better? Have we outgrown our initial way of doing data? Are we using the right platform, and that sort of thing? So there's all kinds of things to look at as you grow your program, as you grow asset management, and all of those little things that you're going to be looking at are going to require some form of resource, whether it be time, staff, or money. Like it's going to require a resource of some form. But then you get to a point where it's running, it's up, it's working, and you're looking at it, you're monitoring it, and then you're measuring it, and then you're actively implementing it, and you find those enhancements, you find those tweaks, and then you're well on your way. So first step, obviously, you need to be dedicated to it. And then once you are dedicated, once you start championing it, then you start building from that with the resources and commitments. You see where you need it. You see where your strengths are, you see where your weaknesses are, and you move on from there. You bring the weaknesses up with, might need certain different resources. It might not be bringing it in-house or out-house. You just look where your strengths and weaknesses are, and you bring those forward, and you see where your best bet to committing that resources, your best bang for your buck will be. Next competency that the asset management readiness scale looks at is the data and information part. And this is the, I guess, the guts of your program. This is the raw data, the raw information that you're going to be looking at and building and making informed decisions on. So developing and maintaining an asset inventory data set is the first outcome of this. And it's a very, very key part of your asset management program. It's knowing what you have, where you have it, and how old is it? When do I need to replace it? How much is it going to cost me to replace it? So these are things that the data and your asset inventory is going to tell you. Key performance of assets and your levels of service. So it'll help identify, and that leads into your risk. Your risk management is your levels of service. Of key assets, of all your assets, you're going to have a level of service. So the level of degradation of the main road going through your town is not going to be as bad as what you would let a side road going into three houses you're going to get to. If both are equally in poor shape, you're going to do the main road first, most likely because of the more people use it. It's a higher priority to keep that at a higher level of service. If it's the main street, an ambulance is probably going to be using that road in your community. So there's various factors that go into determining your levels of service, and that's just an example of that. And having accurate information on your financials for the assets helps you into the next step, which will be your capital planning. So you need to know what's it costing us in maintenance? Has our maintenance gone up? If so, is it worth replacing that? And what's the cost to replace it? And that helps guide the more up to date. Because I mean, you can go out to a consultant and they can come back and they're going to put a cost on your road, and they're going to say it's going to cost X to replace it, and that's going to be on a best practice number that may or may not be accurate for your region. Some of the best practices guides out there for costs of facilities and stuff like RS means, they do have some factors in for different regions, but I can guarantee you the cost that they put in to replace a facility, for example, in St. John's versus the facility in Goose Bay, they're not going to be what you guys are experiencing in the real world. So if you do go out to outside sources and you do have real life costs, I encourage you to pass those along. They should be asking for them. They really should be interviewing your staff when they come to do an assessment of your infrastructure, regardless of facility, infrastructure, whatever it is. They should be interviewing the people who are using it daily and finding those real numbers, because that's going to make your planning data that much more accurate. And it's going to, like I said, it typically involves input from a variety of sources. So you may not have the ability to go out and put the data into a data set functional tool that you may have to get someone to come in and do that. But you may have in-house sources for when you last replaced the majority of your roads or the majority of your infrastructure, when the facility was constructed, like how much maintenance. That's all going to come from a variety of sources. So the asset data is the first outcome, and it looks at, do you have an inventory? Do you have approximate quantities? Do you have the aging condition? If you have some of that, it could be spread out and it could be anecdotal, but the knowledge exists. So it's about gathering that. And level 1 talks about, do you have it? So you've got the tangible capital assets. So most of you are able to say, yeah, we are at level 1. Then it's growing that data set, finding the gaps, finding out where you're missing key information, key data, and then you implement your strategy to gather that data in a way that is functional for you as an organization, because you don't want to get data in that you can't use, or you don't, and too much, you need to get the right amount of data, because too much data is just, you're not going to use it, look at half of it, it's just going to be noise. So you need to find out the sweet spot of data that you're going to need, and that's going to change too. As when you first start this system, this process, you're going to have a small window of data, and then that's going to grow and grow until you have a fleshed out data set. And you want to make sure that your data is in place and that it's there and growing as you define your need. Expand it to other assets, and this is where we can tie back into the roadmap discussion. So we're going to have all our infrastructure in year 1. So now we go out and capture the main data, the when, the what, the where, the how much, and when I need to replace it. And that's all we get this year. And then we go and we get, okay, how much are we spending in infrastructure? What's the diameter of it? Like, start building quantities, start building that. And we've gotten all our infrastructure done. Now we go onto our facilities. We just, it might be, first off, you just start off, yeah, we have a town hall and its replacement value based on its insured value is $250,000. So that's what it's going to cost to replace that if we ever have the need. And that's what you have first off, but then you expand that on some asset, on the asset, and you get into, okay, the roof is this old, the facade is this old, the windows are this old, and you start breaking it down. It's going to cost X to replace the roof, Y to replace the windows and doors, Z to replace the electrical, and that sort of thing. So you start to expand the data you have, but getting it centralized and getting it in a usable amount, so you're not overwhelmed at first, is the first step. And then you gradually grow and expand as you use it. And as you find you're using it, may be different than when you initially thought you use it. So you just start evolving the level of information. You grow it into, all right, is there a way for efficiencies to, if we spend just a scooch more and get the next level up of like a boiler. We get a more efficient boiler, or we replace our street lights and our field lights with more efficient lighting. What's the payback on that? Is there ways that we can look at our fleet assets and get a more climate-friendly fleet and at a reasonable increased cost that will have a payback period that is worth it for us? So if it's like a 5 years payback period, maybe that's something we do. And we can look at the synergies. That's where you get into the expanded data. Once you collect your initial, you go into the expanded, you go into what assets are we missing, what are our keys, you start your levels of service are all implemented. Your prioritization will come from all of that. So that's where you take your asset data from your initial. Oh, went too far. There you go. And then you get to the performance of it. So then you look at your levels of service. This is where you define that roads. You define how you've captured it, how you renew it. So this is where you talk and you prioritize and you look at how is it performing, how are assets performing, are we replacing them on the right time, are we not replacing them, are we replacing too early? So once you have established your levels of service, you can look at your competing priorities, and then you can certainly go through and say, all right, this is why we're replacing the main road before the side road, because the level of service that we've established through discussions, through our sources, through our feedback from our councils, through our feedback from our municipal partners and our membership and our people in our communities have dictated that this is a priority. This is the level of service they expect. So this is how you build on that. You talk about it, you have your antidote, then you start defining key important service areas that you invest into first. So this is where you get your priorities, so that the squeaky wheel comes along and says, why didn't you pave my street? It's like, well, here's the reason. You have the defensible data, the performance data, and they may not like the answer, but you get that, you have the data to fall back on, and it's just not because I said so. And it's like, here's why, and they can at least follow the logic and decision making. So that's the performance part of it. It's just you're looking at the maintenance costs, and are we increasing maintenance? So then we go back to, all right, maybe it's time to renew. So monitoring that and the level of service. Is there like a component that's no longer available for a part? So that's the level of risk there. And then that leads into financials. Like I said, you all should have the tangible capital assets. So you all should be around level 1. And then you expand from there as you're renewing, as you're renewing stuff, as you're encountering these real life costs that it's costing you as municipalities. That's where you should be updating your actual quantity costs, your actual replacement costs, so that you're having real live data that you can budget on. You should be monitoring your maintenance costs so that over the cycles as they go, you are noticing when there's an increase in your maintenance, and maybe then now's the time to replace that before it gets too out of hand. So that's where your financial information and tracking comes into be. So keeping track, keeping it updated, and updating it every time you do a new project with the most current information. So just updating your assets and sustaining that, and understanding that there's a way to optimize with the maintenance cost versus the renewal cost. There's a key point in time in doing that. That'll lead you to planning and decision making, and that's looking at having a clear set of standards and documents as to how you make your decisions, which adds to clarity, using your data to make a capital and operating plan, and your budgeting, which will come back from that financial. So we kind of talked about this during the whole data part. So documenting your assets, planning approaches vary across your municipality. So it's just a matter of standardizing how you implement your decision-making process, how you document things. So if you have a bunch of silos, it's about bringing that together into one. Rather than ad hoc, we're making decisions based on gut feelings and that it's all right, there's criteria. And you get to that point, you establish your criteria of how you're going to make these decisions. Structured planning approach in place. So that's your standardization and then a consistent structure approach for each of your service levels. So you're just creating a decision-making matrix that helps you prioritize. If there's it'll cover like if there's if one road's more important than the other, if one facility is more important than the other, you'll have a matrix in place that that will help determine that need. And you can define various goals like the amount of usage. Is it a maintenance shed versus a front of house where the public has to visit or a rec center? They're all going to have different levels of service. So this is where you're structuring and different prioritizations as to if you spend the money on X or Y. So this is talking about standardizing that approach so that one department or one person is not making a decision in a different way than the other person. Because then when you go out and have to defend that data, you don't want to be defending, well, this it was done this way over here and that way over there. You just want that consistent, to minimize that approach and keep it as consistent as possible. And this is where your standardization and documentation has in place, because then it's documented. Your plans. This is the capital planning portion. This is once you have your data, picking your priorities, looking at your budget, and then determining what you need to do each year. So right now, as we talked about earlier, it's reactive is probably the majority of your planning process. Moving from that, you got a good data set in place. Excellent. Now we start looking at the data, looking at what's coming due next year, what's in the backlog, what's past its useful life and should have been replaced 2 years ago. And then you're going to run out of money. So then it's just, all right, you go back to your standardization documentation and your prioritization, and you start looking at prioritizing, picking the ones and deferring the other. It's about less worse. So it's about levels of service, and this is where your plan comes in. You start to forecast your financial needs based on that updated financial information you have. And then you have a data-driven plan, and you can see for years to come what's coming, and then we get to flattening that curve. This is where it all starts. The rubber starts to hit the road here when you start into your planning, and the benefits of asset management is going to start rolling in when you start your planning process, because you'll be able to see what's coming in the future. You'll be able to allot for budget increases. So if you know that there's no way you're going to be able to meet the capital need in 7 years, realistically, you may need to start looking at how do we get this funding? Do we need to implement a slight increase in taxes revenue? That sort of thing. You start to look at possible solutions, but it's a lot easier to look at those solutions in a long-term approach rather than an immediacy. Oh God, we need this money in 2 years. How are we going to do that? So this is where your plan starts looking at short and long-term objectives. Long-term objective being like, do we see growth in our community that's going to need a rec center? And if so, okay, so what are we using now? Do we put capital investment into these buildings and make them new, or do we kind of run them till we build this new rec center? And this is where the planning and budgeting part of this comes into play. And then you compare budgets, which is basically what we were talking about with the planning, based on this need that you have and based on your plan. You got your updated financial information, so you can certainly go through and start assigning budgets to this based on your up-to-date dollars that you develop throughout the process of this. And then you're looking at capital planning. And the way I kind of advise is you do, when you get into the swing of things and you're up and running and you're in place, you're looking at doing a 3-year detail plan, a 5-year capital plan, but 3 years of detail. Here's the projects we want to do in the next 3 years. And then here's buckets of projects for the following 2. We know we want to do Main Street, John's Place, and James Lane in year 1, 2, and 3. But we also know, based on what we've always, based on historical data, that we're also going to need to do road work in years 4 and 5. So we just go, all right, so Main Street's going to cost $150,000. John's Place is going to cost $75,000. James Lane is going to cost another $100,000. We're going to put $100,000 in year 4 for roads, $100,000 in year 5 for roads. That way you don't, because chances are by the time you get to year 3, there's been that many like push to year 2s. Maybe there's a funding source announced that if you did a detailed report capital plan for years 4 and 5, it won't even look like what you had planned when you get to year 3 anyway. So then you update. As you finish year 1, you go, all right, well, what was year 4? Now we can start fleshing out the projects in that. Year 2, we update year 2, we get to year 2, year 5 becomes that, and then year 6 and year 7 just become buckets. So that's my recommendation and advice on how you start your capital planning process. The contribution to asset management plan practice is the last one in the competencies. It looks at the communications. This is all about the communications internally, externally, and being leaders in the community. And we have some of those leaders within our community now that are eager to help. And this is how you get you communicate within your municipality and outside of your municipality to our communities of practice, to our provincial asset management culture. And training and development is key. It's going to help strengthen and your in-house knowledge. So you may have staff that are taking this on. Clearly, here, those of you participating are interested. So you are either doing this on your own because it's your own interest, or you've been it's been recommended by council or others to take this and increase your understanding of asset management concepts. If that's the case, that you're doing it on your own, you're already at level 1. If you've been recommended, look, you're at level 2. To build on that, you start implementing in-house awareness sessions and in-house training sessions that build the benefits of asset management programs within the knowledge of that, the knowledge base in your organization. So you start growing it internally and communicating it and bringing everyone together so that everyone's able to communicate the benefits of asset management in their own words without having to say, yeah, I know what asset management is. It's managing assets. They're able to actually communicate the understanding and the benefits that the municipality is able to see from it. You grow that into a defined training plan for the defined roles of these. As it grows, you get to a place where you have dedicated staff for asset management training. As new staff come into that role, there's a dedicated program. And that's where your training goes. You have a dedicated training program, whether you are doing training in-house or you have dedicated training providers for asset management. That's all, it's there, it's structured, it's in documentation of this is how we train our members. This is how we get to the level 4 and the level 5s is obviously just going and improving, constantly evolving. So we gain and gather information that way. Internal communication and knowledge sharing is eliminating the silos. Everyone in your organization knows and is aware of your asset management program. You don't have that risk of loss of Johnny hitting the lottery and retiring tomorrow, and he took all that integral day-to-day knowledge because he's working with these assets on a daily basis, and he just disappears to a nice warm climate. So you don't want to lose that. So it's about mitigating that, improve your record keeping, start documenting stuff, start building your data set. This is where it ties back to the data set that you're going to build. So it's out of people's minds and onto people's paper. And you just grow that and you freely pass it along. And then it's just something that's water cooler talk. By the time it's up and running, it exists and everyone's aware of it. Everyone knows where the municipality is at in their asset management program as part of the day-to-day working routine of the municipality. Then the external, you're able to communicate it to your public. So you're able to demonstrate the benefits of the asset management program to the people in your communities. You're able to do that throughout the explain to them the benefits of it. You're able to explain to the person who's calling to complain the decision-making process. You're able to issue annual reports on your assets and the state of assets sort of deal. And it's just being able to actively communicate externally and share that knowledge is where you grow this. And yeah, that's the, so we go into, and this whole thing is able to be filled out and gone through our online tool, which is again is available at your dashboard of the MNO website. It has all of the core competencies up along the top ribbon there. Each one has a level of service, the level of readiness that you're at with the policy objectives for each of these core core competencies. Then at the bottom of the page, you'll see a place to type in notes for each one of these, and then there's the save button. So it's key that when you go back in and fill this out, you can click along each one. Wherever you're to, you can click the complete it, and then you save it at the end of the day, and that'll save it. As you improve and grow your plan, you can keep going through and updating. You can come back in and update it, and then your asset management readiness scale is updated as well. We here at MNL will have a copy, and we'll be able to call it up when you're looking for advice on things and see where you're at and see where you can be. So I appreciate your time and patience on that, and certainly open for questions if there are any, and if there's not enough time to get through all of them, because I feel like I've gone a little long, we can certainly, I will answer every and all of them. You can email them to me, you can check them in chat, but I will absolutely be happy to get by and answer whatever I can.
Hi, Jason. Kathleen again.
Yes.
We do have one question.
Awesome.
Clifford Reed asks, while waiting for funding to collect and compile data, is it recommended that the local asset management team continue to work on the policy and governance plan?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never too early to start. It's definitely something that, with or without funding, is going to benefit your municipality in and of itself. So if you have the available resources without funding, by all means, start in on it. And if you're looking for that funding to come out in like when it comes out in January, you're going to need this asset management readiness scale done anyway. So getting ahead of that is going to benefit you in the end.
Fabulous. And perhaps just a plug too. In 2 weeks' time, our partnership with Geomatics Atlantic is resulting in a conference with a number of municipal asset management related sessions, including ones on QGIS and Esri software options for mapping assets. Also, there's going to be an emergency preparedness panel and some other content on asset management and GIS. Perhaps you can just say a word or two about where that might fit for folks that are working on their asset management plans.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, yeah, the QGIS and the geomatics, I guess, industry, if that's the right terminology, is definitely a great resource for asset management and for your data inventory. A lot of the assets and infrastructure that you're going to need to be looking after are going to be able to be looked after in a QGIS, and most other ways of doing it. Like even if you're doing your database in an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to want to know where it's to, and QGIS and geomatic data is going to be able to facilitate that in a way that is quite useful and easy for you to access. So I will certainly be trying to take in as much of that conference as I can as well, because I certainly want to be able to pass along information there to anyone who's looking for me. It's a great resource, great tool. I guess, yeah, and by all means, encourage people to go and check that out as well. I will see you there.
Grand. Well, thank you very much. That was a really informative presentation, Jason. We're at time now, everybody. So I encourage you all to go over to the MNL conference.ca site for a full list of the remaining sessions today and tomorrow. Also check out the TELUS Lounge any day between 9 and 5 by clicking on the TELUS logo on the bottom of the website page. They have a lot of prizes and great deals on solutions from TELUS Business. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and the sessions to come.
Thanks, folks.